Namaste. So, do you want me to destroy the story of the three wise men for you, or should we leave it?
Oh, I will destroy it. Just destroy away. Okay.
Well, first of all, their names are clearly Vinny, Vito, and Fausto. And we know this because they saw the star in the east, which means they came from the west. They have gold and incense, which means they're from Rome. Except there wasn't a Catholic church then, so they probably were really from Afghanistan, but, you know, it's more fun if they're Vinny, Vito, and Fausto, the wise guys in the Joe Pesci.
That was a Lutheran.
Probably.
The one that brought myrrh, Philly hammer casserole.
Probably. And they're kind of like a committee, so.
Because gold and frankincense are very impractical gifts for baby, but the wife said, take this money.
Take this money. Have you seen The Life of Brian?
Yes.
When
Many
the
times.
three wise men show up in the wrong place and they give Brian's mother the gold, frankincense, and myrrh, and she keeps saying, "What's myrrh?" Myrrh smells just like shit.
Oh, so it's
And-
compost.
Yeah, they mix it with frankincense and burn it so that you don't enjoy it too much. But, you see, we think the three wise men, because we've seen the nativity scenes, you know, the ones Fontanini sells with the dolphins in them, that are historically accurate. Because they show up in the nativity scenes, right? And so we think, well, Jesus is born, and boom, here come the three wise men. But you see, the problem is they didn't have cars, and they took them a long time to get somewhere. So if they really did see this star, it took them, you know, they wouldn't have been there in the stable with the dolphins and the chickens and the... and you can even see there's a hint of it here because when they saw the star, they were filled with joy. They entered the house, not the stable, and saw the child with Mary, his mother, falling to their knees. They honored him. And it's not just in this translation that it's house either. But then there's this whole Herod thing. And right after this, Joseph and Mary take off to Egypt. And there's the slaughter of the innocents. Herod has all the kids under 2 years old in Bethlehem or thereabouts killed, except that there's no historical record of a slaughter of the innocents. Nor is there a historical record of a census that would have made Mary and Joseph go to Bethlehem. And so they probably didn't have to go to Egypt, which is probably just as well, because they probably were in Nazareth because the child is 2 years old. And so you can't try and look at this and say, what's the historical value? Because there arguably isn't. And, Mike?
I brought a friend along with a compassionate heart.
Oh, good.
Oh, wonderful.
So you have to decide whether you're going to look at things from today backwards or try and go back and look at the story forwards. And it makes a huge difference. So let's play with that with a different example. If we think about cars, we think about probably first whatever car we drive now, unless you junked it. The last car we had, the car before that, maybe the first car we had, maybe the car we always wanted. That's how we tend to think about cars. Maybe the next car we're going to buy. But if we look at it that way, we're not really going to understand how cars develop, because when Henry Ford was sitting around trying to come up with a car, they were trying to do horseless carriages. The car was to get them beyond horse-drawn carriages. And you see it from a whole different perspective if you start at the very beginning. A very good place to start. And so, if you want to understand the wise men, you have to understand that, first of all, they weren't Jewish, which made them dirty, filthy, unclean to Jewish people. So there's a certain amount of scandal that the wise men show up. And it's debatable whether that's more scandalous than the shepherd, who could have been Jewish, but shepherds were thought to be, well, dirty, rotten, filthy workers. And so you have this king coming into the world who's all of a sudden surrounded by people who the culture of his time would have found completely unacceptable. And yet, Mary and Joseph don't go shoo shoo, get out of here in the story. They take whatever's brought, if it really was brought, because if they had a chest of gold, then Jesus wouldn't have been raised a poor laborer's child. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe it's not a newspaper story. Maybe it's a story about this, a beginning of a change in perspective that says only certain people are welcome. Which is why the first reading was about that struggle in the Buddhist world, where there's great debate about the role of women. There's been, despite the fact that the earliest Buddhist tradition indicates that women were ordained, full monastics just like men, the men in Buddhism have spent their time trying to say that, well, that's lost forever, sorry, so sad, too bad.
That would never happen in any other tradition.
Well, I'm saying it happens in every tradition. I'm saying it's not at all unique. So we can't, on the one hand, we shouldn't get too rough on any one tradition for its shortcomings in that area because it's a common failure. That's a very different thing from saying that they aren't legitimate shortcomings. So rather than wondering about how it is that star over the course of 2 years managed to hold still over one spot, given what we know about the earth revolving around the sun, we need to get at the theme of the story underneath. And what is the theme of every biblical story? What's the overwhelming theme in the New Testament? If I asked 100 people that, 100 of them would probably say, oh,
I
salvation.
have an answer.
What's your answer?
Well, the Beatles said all there is love.
Well, yes, but that's not what I mean. What I should have said, what's the goal? You know, and the goal most people tend to think, in terms of Christianity anyway, is salvation, heaven. And that is an answer that's read from today looking backwards. It is not an answer Jesus would have given. It's an answer we get from, well, if anybody happened to be Lutheran, I'm sorry, but they would have looked at Luther, and then before Luther gone back into probably Thomas Aquinas and back to the Catholic Church in history and how they all interpreted what happened. And if you're Episcopalian, it would have been Cranmer and back. If you're Roman Catholic, it's a much more straight line to the Roman Catholic saints. But if you went to the rabbis and said, what was the Jewish religious story, the story Jesus was steeped in, it wasn't going to heaven, it was Exodus, it was liberation, it was freedom from bondage, it was freedom from enslavement. It was, dare we say, awakening. And so this then becomes a huge event in that overarching story of awakening, because the dirty people are starting to get in. And it's kind of like an egg.
Okay.
Once they've been laid, it's hard to keep them on the farm. And once the door opens, or is that chickens? I don't know. But once the door is open,
It's keeping you in Paris. Once you, what was it? You can't keep them on the farm once they've seen Paris.
that's right. That's right. And once the door is opened, you can't close it again. Now, we have been trying. Every tradition tries to close the door. Just like Buddhism tries to close the door on women's ordination. Just like Christianity, in some traditions, hasn't even opened the door yet. Just like there are problems in just about every tradition with getting a truly diverse group together. Now, I think some of those are more cultural than motivated by ill will. If you try and get a white person to stomp their feet and clap their hands at the same time, you'll understand why worship is different in the white church. But, and that may be a bridge we never learn to cross, you know. That may be a bridge we never learn to cross, but that's quite different from exclusion. That's just a cultural difference. So, but what is it that bothers us about all these dirty, stinky people showing up around Jesus? And what bothers us is that we need dirty, stinky people. Because we don't really believe in love. And so the only way we can convince ourselves that maybe they might be lovable is if we can find somebody who's even less deserving of love than we are and point them out. So I may be a real son of a bitch, but the guy down the street is worse. I may not treat my family the way I should, but at least I don't smell like sheep shit like a shepherd does. You know? I may not ever really be honest, but I never stole a 69-cent cigar from a convenience store. And we do it over and over again, and at its base, it's precisely because we find it so hard to believe in ourselves. To believe we're okay. And I would suggest the way we've set up the Christian tradition anyway, and maybe even every tradition, is to reinforce that idea that we're not okay. Because as long as you're not okay, you'll keep filling the plate. As long as you're not okay, you'll keep coming back. Much more reliably than if we tell you you're okay. As long as I can convince you that you need the church, you'll keep going. And if you doubt that that's intentional, look at how angry people get when they come across the other idea. That maybe it is about exodus, maybe it is about liberation, maybe religion is supposed to set you free. Once you do that, when you get somebody in the power position, they'll want to tell you how wrong you are. And what they'll refer to you to see how wrong you are the doctrine and dogma, the rules that they made up to make sure you stayed on the farm. So the three wise men, the Epiphany, the manifestation of Christ to the Gentiles, but you have to say that with a British accent to make it really good, which I don't do that, is less about birthday presents, the relative worth or lack thereof of astrology, than it is about everybody being welcome. And about finding ways, year after year, decade after decade, century after century, to tear down that very human construct that says somebody's got to be not okay.
Who does that again?
Everybody. We all need somebody to be not okay.
No, but you mentioned a church or a religious affiliation?
Everyone.
Well,
Every
all
last
of
one.
them.
Every last one. Now the founders never said that. But as the institution starts to form and needs to preserve itself, you have to be not okay. Because I need you to come back. Because I've got this building fund going on. I need to add the grade school, or, the fellowship hall's looking a little raggy.
Well, Kirk is telling us he wants to build a college now.
Amen.
They have 17 acres, they're gonna do it.
Amen.
If they can get the neighborhood, traffic and everything out. And everybody does an altar call every Sunday.
Yeah.
The whole crowd gets up.
To keep you coming back.
Well, no, he gives the altar call, but the same people go up every Sunday. Just to make sure.
And that's not freedom, that's bondage. At its worst.